Hello everybody. Hope you guys have an amazing day. Hopefully you guys enjoy episode 1 with Diamond Destiny. On episode 2 today we are going to talk about 3 things. But before that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Gwen. I'm from Indonesia. I am 13 years old and First of all, I want to apologize for the background sound or if you guys hear any wind sounds because I'm outside right now while recording this. So today I'm going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about what is the Bible and what the Bible story is about, and we're going to talk about the Messiah. So let's just get right into it. So first, what is the Bible? The Bible is one of the most influential books in human history. It explores the big question, why do we exist and what happens after we died? It inspired many people to do amazing things and also confused many others. And you probably got one Bible at your house sitting somewhere, or you guys really read your Bible, which is good. Keep doing it. So first, what is the Bible? The Bible is a small library of books that all emerged out of the history of the people of ancient Israel. They were just like any other ancient civilization, but among them are a long line of individuals called prophets, and they view Israel's story as anything but ordinary. They saw it as a central part of what God was doing for all humanity, and these prophets are geniuses. They expertly crafted the Hebrew language to write epic narratives, very sophisticated poetry. They are masters of metaphors and storytelling. This is to explore the life's most complicated questions about death, life, and the human struggles. So, a lot of different authors writing this book, yet in this text, we bridges over 1,000 years. So it's very amazing. All of these different authors write the same story, but they have like a different year time period over 1,000 years, which is wow, that is amazing. This is also one of the ways you know that the story of the Bible is true, because they are one unified story, but they also bridges over 1,000 years. Starting with Israel's origin in Egypt to their first temple, but then they're conquered by the Babylonians who took them to exile. Then a crucial moment in their history, many Israelites returned to their land, built a second temple, reformed their identity, and this is where the Jewish scripture starts to reform today. In Hebrew, the Jewish scriptures called Tanakh, T-A-N-A-K, Tanakh. The T stands for Torah, the law. It is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The N stands for Nephiim, in Hebrew for prophets. Historical books of the prophet's point of view. Then you get the poetic books from the prophet. That is what Nephiim is. The book is like Joshua, Samuel, Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and etc. Then the K stands for Ketuvim. It is a book of writings, poetic books, wisdom books, and more narratives like Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Ruth, Chronicles, and etc. And the Jewish people believe through all of these literary works, God speaks to his people. Now, during the Second Temple period, there are other Jewish writings as well: Maccabees, Tobit, Judith, Wisdom, Sirach, and etc. They are also highly valued in Jewish community, and there was debates from the ancient times whether or not some of these books should be considered as part of their scriptures, because after the Old Testament, God didn't speak to his people for 400 years, so there are no direct message from the Lord, and The Second Temple period writings are from that time, so it is more inspired by the Old Testament. Why do they put the Tanakh all together? Why do they put the Old Testament all together? Just like I said, it was to tell one epic story, which we're gonna dig into later. It was about how God uses His people to bring order and beauty out of the chaos of our world. And it led to a new leader who would come and renew all creation. And the Tanakh concludes, and that leader never comes, which means the Old Testament and the promised leader hasn't come yet. It never comes. Well, at least until a few centuries later. A Jewish man named Jesus of Nazareth, he claims that he was carrying the Tanakh story forward. Jesus did miracles and a lot of cool stuff, but then he was killed. But his followers claim that he rose again from the dead, which is a very cool thing. And you guys know that this is real because there are 500 witnesses. So there's 500 witnesses. And I learned from the movie of this Robel, The Case for Christ, if I'm not mistaken the title. If you guys believe that it is magic or they got hypnotized by it, it is impossible for 500 people to be hypnotized. I saw that movie. There's this woman, I forgot what her name is, then that she's this expert on these things, and she said that it will be more miraculous rather than the Jesus rising from the dead. And this is a true story, by the way. So yeah, I recommend you guys to check that movie out to learn more deeper. So if you guys say Jesus didn't die, it was one of his disciples, no, because there are a lot of witnesses. So it will be impossible for 500 people to lie rather than 2 people. So this is very true. They said Jesus was that long-awaited leader who will restore the world. His earliest followers, called apostles, they composed about the story of Jesus. They call it the good news or the gospel. You guys has probably heard this a lot of times. They formed an account called Acts. It's about how the Jesus movement spread outside of Israel, and they made letters to all these different Jesus communities to all around the ancient world. The apostles wrote all of this as the fulfillment of the Tanakh, and they were continuing of the Jewish tradition. And they also believe God uses the apostles' writings to talk to his people, along with the scriptures of Israel. Now that is the Old and the New Testament. But what about the Second Temple literature? Different groups had different views about some of these books, but they valued and read these texts because they passed them along with the Jewish scriptures. The Christian movement has taken different forms over the last 2,000 years. And from the beginning, all Christians recognized the Tanakh and the New Testament as scriptures. And for centuries, much of the Second Temple literature was read as part of the biblical tradition. The Catholic Church made it official and called some of the books from the Second Temple writings of deuterocanonical books. Orthodox churches use even more books from the Second Temple literature. And in the 1500s, during the Reformation, Protestant Christians stick with the Old and the New Testament. Now that is what the Bible is about. Now just like I said, right now we are going to dig into the story of the Bible. So what is the story of the Bible? It begins with the beautiful world in order that is created by God. He has the power to take the darkness and chaos and turn it into order and beauty. And a garden full of life. God appoints humans, his creation, or in Hebrew, Adam. And they were made as God's image, which means they are commissioned to rule the world on God's behalf. harnessing all its potential and creating even more beauty and order. This is a story about humans using their powers to do meaningful, life-giving work. But how? Humanity now faces a choice that is represented by a fruit tree. Humans could partner with God and find freedom by trusting His knowledge of good and evil, or following on what they think is good and evil, which God warns will kill them. They hear a mysterious voice, a dark, mysterious creature that tells them the choice is simple. Take the fruit. It will give you power and freedom to rule the world on your own terms. This creature lied to them and said that they can become like God, knowing what good and evil is. So they choose to define good and evil on their own terms. It leads to fractured relationships, violence, and ultimately a whole civilization of Babylon that has redefined evil as good. Oh, and by the way, Babylon in the Bible represents evil. So whenever you guys hear Babylon, it is evil. So God scatters this corrupted human project. Then there is a story of a man and a woman who come out from Babylon named Abraham and Sarah. God promises that from them will come a new people, a nation that will have a chance to make the right choices. And if they succeed, it will open up this new way forward for the rest of humanity. So that's why the rest of the Bible story is about this family. But sadly, it does not go well, despite God's personal guidance. And this is personal guidance. Abraham's family gives in to that same temptation that redefines good and evil in their own. Even the best people were in charge, rulers who loved God, guidance, and had defined wisdom, and they gave in. So the prophets warned Israel that those choices will lead them back to Babylon as a conquered captive living in exile. And that is exactly what happens. But the story is not over yet. God's going to send a new leader to Israel to cover for their failures and transform people's minds to make the right choices. And a few centuries later, we're introduced to a man called Jesus of Nazareth, who comes from a long line of Israel kings. He is bringing all these promises to completion. And he even confronted that dark, mysterious voice that all humanity has given into and resists its power. Wow! Then he announces that God has arrived to rule the world through him and teach about God's definition of good. And he said that the real power comes from serving others. Keep in mind that the real power is serving others. Keep that in mind. He said the people who love the poor and even their enemies. This is the people who actually rule the world. Jesus is God became human to be for Israel and all humanity, to be what we cannot be for ourselves. He came to take the punishment of our evil into himself, and his sacrificial love is more powerful than evil and death itself. So, humanity is given a new choice and a new tree to stick in the old ways of living. In the story, those who chose Jesus finds themselves energized by God's own power. People who know they are loved and forgiven by God can become people who love and forgive others in return. So the Jesus community spreads quickly, but there was persecutions from the outside by people in power and confusion on the inside, and even compromise. And even still now, we are still struggling with this. We are still fighting the same battle. Because following Jesus is really hard, So the apostles wrote letters to comfort and to challenge these communities to stay faithful to the difficult ways of Jesus. So the Bible ends by pointing to this future day where all wrongs are made right, where evil is punished, heaven and earth are reunited, and humanity can rule together in the love and power of God. Now that is the story of the Bible. So now we're gonna dig in to Jesus, to the Messiah. So we already talked about the Bible and what the story of the Bible is about. The next thing we're gonna talk about is Jesus. Okay, it's more deeper about the Bible. So long story short, God made this perfect world and appoints humans to rule over it. But then there is this snake, the mysterious dark voice, deceiving the humans, and they got deceived, and because of this evil enters the earth. Yeah, so the snake tricked the humans, and that is why evil has come to this earth, because the humans give in to the evil. So yeah, now why is there a talking snake in the garden? We don't know. The Bible didn't say why or how is this snake in the garden. But this snake is in a rebellion against God and wants to get people to doubt God's goodness and lead them to a path forward death. And this snake is the source of evil still today. Still when you guys are listening to this, yeah, he is still the source of that evil. But there is this hope that someone is going to come in the future, the son of Eve. And he is gonna come and crush the serpent's head and destroy evil at its source. This battle, the serpent is going to bite this guy's heel. Why is this king, this guy, the son of Eve, get bitten? Isaiah tells us that the promised king will receive this wound because of humanity's evil, and that it kills him. But all of a sudden, he comes back, and Isaiah said it is because he suffered this wound that he can now become the source of healing to other people. Then we meet this guy called Abraham, and God said through his family, goodness and blessings will be restored back to all the nations in the world. And then Abraham gets grandson Judah got a promise that a king will come from his line, and the whole world gonna follow this king, and he's gonna bring peace and harmony, and it will be lit. So the first king from Judah's line was David. The first king of Israel is Saul, but he is not from Judah's line. But King David, he fell into the same temptation of humanity. He didn't crush the snake's head, but it was the opposite. The snake crushed him. But God made a promise to David that the king will come from his line. But one by one, all of the kings gave in to the snake and chose evil. Everything becomes so bad that they ruled Israel right into the ground. And Babylon, a big bad empire, took them to exile and takes them out. So there is no more king to fulfill this promise. But during those days, dark days, prophets just keeps talking about the coming king and reminding us he will come and defeat evil, and he will restore the garden that Adam and Eve have lost. Yeah. The Old Testament ended, but the king never came. That is why in the New Testament we are introduced to Jesus of Nazareth. He is the king that will crush the snake's head. He came from the line of David, Judah, and Abraham. He goes around Israel telling that the goodness of God's kingdom is here. And he begins confronting the effects of evil on people by healing them and forgiving them of their sins and evil. Jesus tells his closest followers that he will become king and bring peace by taking the full effect of humanity's evil into himself. That is the fatal snake bite wound. It seems like the serpent wins. Jesus rise from the dead. And now, Jesus' power over evil and death has now become available to us to begin confronting the effects of evil in our own lives. But evil is still a problem. So the story of the Bible ends, and there will be a future day when Jesus comes and restore the goodness of the garden here on earth and will destroy the snake once and for all. Now that is today's podcast is about. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. So in concludes, there will be a future day where all of us will live in peace and harmony with God. All of it, this evil will be punished, and we will live in harmony, and justice will be served. And again, I am sorry for the noisy background. Hopefully you guys will look forward to season 2, where you guys gonna hear me talking again. Hopefully you guys will enjoy the next episode. And yeah, so have a good day. God bless.